Hello and welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. Jill Stein's call for a vote recount in 3 states is perplexing, to say the least. No meaningful fraud has been claimed, and even Obama says the vote was free and fair from a cybersecurity perspective. What does Jill want? Will the American presidential election ever be over? To Crosstalk Jill Stein's vote recall, I'm joined by my guest, Michael Flanagan in Washington. He is president of Flanagan Consulting and a former congressman. And in Orlando, we have Alex Newman. He is an international journalist for various conservative publications. All right, gentlemen, Crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. Michael, I'm titling this program Reckless Jill, but on second thought, I've been thinking maybe it should be the politics of illegitimacy, because this voter recall smacks of making the election process and outcome illegitimate. And I can't see any other reason for this other than that. What are your thoughts? Go ahead.
I think you're right. Jill Stein is in an unenviable position of at least, according to Democrats, having cost Hillary the election in several states and perhaps the election overall. And so she's got some rehabilitation to do for herself on the left, and part of that is seemingly to oppose Donald Trump root and branch by doing this effort. This is paid for by Soros and other bazillionaires, and is sweeping up some small donations from good-meaning and decent Democrats who just want to continue to fight the fight. I think you're right. It's just got to end. They've got to surrender and say it's over. We lost. We have to move on and work with Congress and try and get our agenda moved in the appropriate way, rather than in these endless AstroTurf demonstrations and crazy activities like this pointless recount.
Okay, Alex, particularly since we saw during the presidential debates that when Trump was asked about how he would consider the election outcome, and you know the storm that he faced in the media, and particularly from Hillary Clinton and specifically, what I find really troubling here is that there's a possibility here, very small, but there is a possibility that we could see this election thrown into the House of Representatives. Again, a process to delegitimize the election and its outcome. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, you know, the irony of Hillary Clinton's remarks before the election, talking about, how outrageous it was for Donald Trump to question the legitimacy of the vote, and, oh, he's not promising yet to accept the results no matter what. This is terrible. This undermines our government, et cetera, et cetera. The irony of this now, I think, is just incredible, especially since the Clinton camp officially came out and, announced its support for this, the campaign's attorney. But it does actually, I think, cast the election somewhat, make it seem a little bit illegitimate. But in another respect, I think it's interesting because, Donald Trump mentioned on Twitter, and there had been suspicions about this for a long time, that there was indeed some vote fraud in this election. My suspicion is that the vast majority of the vote fraud was in favor of Hillary Clinton.
Of course.
And, you talk about illegal immigrants and non-citizens voting. You talk about dead people voting. You talk about the abuse of, the voter rolls. They register old people who they know aren't going to vote. And I think you have some very troubling issues here that really should be addressed. So, I think they might be hanging themselves with their own rope here. And I think that'll be an interesting thing, because there are a number of issues here that need to be cleared up, with Soros money, these left-wing radical attorneys and some of these extremist federal judges have been knocking down, in state after state, the measures that people's elected representatives at the state level are trying to put in place to ensure the integrity of the vote. Getting non-citizens off the rolls, getting felons off the rolls, getting dead people off the rolls. And so I hope, it is my hope that all of this brouhaha over, Jill Stein's demands for a recount and so on leads to a real conversation, because I do think we have some issues in our electoral process, and I do think that they need to be addressed. The irony is just, I think it's the opposite of what Jill Stein is claiming.
Exactly. Michael, one of the bizarre things, I think, in all of this is that Jill Stein was able to raise about $3 million for her presidential campaign, in which she garnered about less than 1%. And now she has a war chest of $7 million. That's really quite remarkable, isn't it? And I have to wonder, out loud here, are they going to keep the change when this is all done?
I'm sure they will. And that probably has something to do with how vociferously she's going after this and how she'd like to worm her way into the heart of the crazy left billionaires who backed Hillary and are now looking for a new horse to ride. So I'm sure she's delighted to have new friends with lots of money. On the comment about the vote fraud, I worked in my youth 7 years for the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners. I am one of the world's great living, breathing authorities on retail vote fraud. And I will tell you that, that the amount of vote fraud in quote-unquote sanctuary cities was astronomical. Here's a little fact for you that you'll enjoy reading, just anecdotal. In the city of Chicago, where Donald Trump gained 8 to 10% of the African-American vote according to exit polling in the AP, 13% according to the Pew polling. In Chicago, in the African-American wards, Donald Trump drew 3%. And, this is more remarkable, Hillary Clinton drew more votes and a larger percentage of the votes than Chicago's first black mayor, Harold Washington, who was elected in a joyous, raucous election over a non-existent Republican opponent. You got to go a long way to convince me that there isn't some shenanigans going on with the vote there and in other sanctuary cities where they have a large number of people, loose and easy, who aren't registered but can register the same day and vote.
You know, Alex, for the life of me, I can't understand why Jill Stein is getting in bed with the Clinton campaign. The Clintons failed. Their campaign was abysmal, one-sided, and the media supported them. I mean, it seems to me that Jill is embracing something that is very, very toxic. I mean, is it just to keep her name out there? Does she want to take the mantle of the left? I mean, you know, she's been on RT many, many times, and I have to say that there's many things that I actually agree with her on. But it seems to me that she's divorcing herself from her reputation right now, and it's going in the wrong direction. I'm just at a loss. Go ahead, Alex.
You know, I've seen a lot of her fans, too, come out and question what the agenda is here. It may well be to get some more media attention. But, you know, I'm sure some of the viewers remember that during the election campaign, she actually suggested that Hillary Clinton would be more dangerous than Donald Trump. You know, having Hillary Clinton with control over the nuclear arsenal may well have led to some very serious and very tragic consequences. So that's interesting to see her kind of flipping here. But, you know, Jill Stein is really on the very, very far fringe left. I mean, just the other day I saw she put out on Twitter, you know, praise for the brutal dictator of Cuba. She said is struggling for justice and who knows what else. And I think Hillary Clinton really moved toward that left-wing fringe, along with the rest of the Democratic Party over the last 8 years. And I think it's clear that the voters, you know, don't like this. I mean, the election was pretty conclusive. The Republicans massively kept their majority in the House, in the Senate, in the state legislatures. And so, you know, I think there's this race to the extreme far radical left. And I think it's a suicide mission for the Democrats. And, you know, maybe Jill Stein can attract a few fringe left-wing supporters and maybe even a few billionaires like Soros. But in the end, it's a losing proposition. America is not a fringe, radical left-wing country.
Michael, I think that's exactly what the election was all about. Seriously, just what Alex just said here. This is a rejection of this agenda that hasn't worked for the majority of people in America, and I'll even throw in, hasn't been really good for the world on top of that here. Again, Jill Stein mystifies me unless she just really wants to take some kind of so-called moral position, or she wants to be able to start a new movement here. But she's going to do it based on what I consider, and I think all three of us consider it, with something that is not legitimate. And I mean, that's not a good way to start a new movement after this crashing and burning of the Democratic Party.
I agree with you, but I think we, the three of us, might be making the same mistake here, in that assuming that the forces working on this, Soros and the others, value a free election.
Okay.
They don't. They value the possession of power. And if they get power by lying, cheating, and stealing, that's fine, because in the end, they're going to do the right thing in their point of view, and people will be happy. So screw them. We're just going to take the power any way we can get our hands on it, and that's going to justify our behavior. And this is the world that Soros lives in and has always worked for. The internet, the Silicon Valley sultans, much behave the same way. The Google guys frighten me to death.
Me too.
In their complete disrespect for the process. And these guys don't care what they have to do to twist the system so that they can be in power. And so you and I and everyone else here on RT worries about the system and the people's will being reflected. They don't care about that. They care about grasping power, and whatever they have to do to get it, they'll get it.
You know, Alex. Another worry, if I can go back to the Electoral College in Congress here. Okay, let's say on December 19th, that for some reason, one reason or another, some of the electoral votes are not cast. Okay, and then neither candidate gets the magical 270 here. It will go to Congress, and Trump will win because it's Republicanly controlled. But that will be another element. The media will go out and say, "See, this shows the illegitimacy of Donald Trump." That's another thing I worry about.